Okay, red-haired shrunken heads. Now, I came across something out of Harvard University that I have never seen before. And it's a shrunken human head of a Caucasian woman, approximately from 1935, but the origin is unknown. And I would assume the origination date is as well. Now, keep in mind, this is from Harvard. And what's interesting is at first they were claiming this was legitimate and from this tribe down in South America that does this kind of thing. And now they're claiming it's not authentic. And I'll just read a little bit on the website. It just says the above item is a genuine shrunken human head, which was displayed at the Warren Museum for many years as an original Javaro Indian Sansa. Okay, it says authentic Sansas were created as trophies of war and to imprison the vengeful spirits of murder victims. In certain indigenous South American tribes, such as the Javaro, if a member of the tribe killed another person, the victim's head was shrunk and ceremonies were performed to trap the victim's spirit in the head to prevent it from harming the murderer. Because the heads were believed to contain a potentially dangerous spirit, great care was taken to prevent its escape through the eyes or mouth. In an authentic Sansa, the mouth is tied closed with twine. Carbon is rubbed into the skin, and the eyes are sewn closed to prevent the spirit's escape or allow it to see through the head. When the first Sansas reached North America and Europe in the mid-19th century, they became very popular as curiosities. A market for genuine Sansas rapidly developed, and the demand quickly exceeded the supply. This demand resulted in the manufacture of fake Sansas by unscrupulous individuals in South America who were not affiliated in any way with the tribes. Nonetheless, these forgeries were unfailingly represented as being from indigenous South American tribes, such as the Javaro, and this created confusion about both the meaning and origin of the practice of creating Sansas. Like the one pictured above, fake Sansas were often made from genuine human material. However, they were easy to spot as forgeries because they did not follow the techniques of the indigenous tribes. In actuality, it is quite simple to spot a fake because it will not hold the characteristics of an authentic Sansa. In addition to the sewn eyes and mouth, authentic Sansas are compressed laterally during preparation and have a suspension string through the scalp. Most telling is that the head pictured above is of a Caucasian, not the usual murder victim of indigenous South American tribes. Caucasians did, however, often fall victim to forgers as donors for their fakes. The museum now believes that this head may have actually been created by a medical student who applied the recipe for creating a shrunken head to his or her cadaver, which is as follows. Okay, I'm going to stop. And it basically gives what the process is. First of all, they admit that this is a Caucasian woman. Notice the red hair, which is very similar to the red hair of the mummies that were found in Peru. And what's interesting to me is at first they were saying it's authentic. Now they're saying it's not. Now, there are some other websites out there with shrunken heads that are also red-haired. I got a screenshot from the Museum that talks about some shrunken heads, and they have red hair or blondish red hair. One of them is on display at the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, which has red hair. And the other one is a blondish red hair, and it says, "Be careful what you ask for. There is somewhat apocryphal story told of a red-haired European man who traveled into Javaro territory as an agent charged with the commission of bringing out an authentic dried and shrunken human head. Eventually, when the head was shipped back to the buyer, however, it was strange in that the Sansa had not the usual dark hair of a South American native, but a glorious crown of red hair." Okay. So, they have two on here that are red-haired on this page. They look different. It's not the same one. And it's Caucasian. They admit that this is a Caucasian, these are Caucasian shrunken heads with red hair. Now, the Javarian people, here's where they live. It says it's a group of indigenous peoples in the headwaters of the Marañón River and its tributaries in northern Peru and eastern Ecuador. These groups identify speakers of distinct languages of the language family of the same name. Okay, looking at the guy, he's clearly Siberian or whatever you want to call him, Asiatic. I'm not going to deny that. But here's the point. With all of these red-haired mummies that are found, in Peru, right where these people were, and suddenly their culture died out, and then there's no more evidence of these red-haired people, and everybody's like, no, it's not Caucasian people, but yet you have some nasty tribes next door that would do these raids on villages, and it says on Wikipedia that these Javaros would go into other people's villages on headhunting raids, usually once a year, and they would kill most of the men and take their heads, and sparing the older women and taking young women as their brides. And then they would make the shrunken heads of the men. Now, I have to wonder, is that what happened to those people in Peru eventually? They were, exterminated off, just as the red-haired people of Lovelock Cave were. And there was mention in my studies that there were other red-haired mummies found all over the southwest of America. There is also, I've also gone into Tyranina up in Wisconsin, and how they were not Asiatic. They were different, which means they were white people, and they were basically killed off and forced out of the area. And as I've said, all of those mounds resemble all of the mounds that were built in Europe. So anytime any of these mummies are found, they disappear. In America, they end up at the Smithsonian, and then they get dumped. And anybody that questions this, such as I have done or other people have done on their YouTube channels, or the very, very few in academia, get automatically called a Nazi, a white supremacist, a racist, and all of the other nasty little name-calling games that are played. To me, this is a huge cover-up. This says to me, here you have a site out of Harvard admitting that this is red hair, that these are Caucasian heads, and the hair is very similar to what you see in some of those Peruvian mummies, and probably the same thing that was out of Lovelock Cave. And, they don't deny it. Yet anything that's out of the ordinary, which shows some kind of a settlement, and like I said, if they can't get their hands on the mummies and destroy them, right away it's, no, they're Siberian, and the hair turns red due to oxidation under the ground. Well, if you have a Siberian with black hair buried under the ground, they don't have exposure to sunlight. And in order to have oxidation, that hair has to be exposed to the UV rays. And certainly if you have these people wrapped up and buried inside a cave for how long, that's not going to be exposed to UV rays either. So are you going to tell me that their hair was red before they died? Well, then if that's the case, how come I don't see a bunch of red-haired Siberians who walked out in the sun when their hair is still pretty dark? So once again, here is another, clue here of this massive cover up and psychological operation that is going on. And I just don't understand what the big deal is to say, look, there were, white people all over the Americas. The Siberians came in, whatever. And I think there were, Jews came in too, out of the Middle East. I think that, the Negritos also came in, and they fought it out. And at one point, this group was victorious. I don't get what is the big deal. Let's tell the truth. But then again, when you get like all of the benefits from victim status, including $3 billion a year to get free medical care, and to build your schools for you, and you get to have casinos and duty-free tobacco and all of the other things. I guess you'd have a lot to lose, wouldn't you? So I'm sure I'm going to get some comments from a angry person, just looking at things honestly, not trying to be siding with anything, just looking at the truth and the evidence. Like I said, I've already gotten a handful of crazy people strolling through that like to use, the Nazi label or supremacist or white supremacist or, what other dumb terms they have. Well, I think I know who the racist is. And I have like I said, I know for sure there's a massive cover up of what went on here. And things were pretty violent. And I've already talked about the cannibalism that was going on. We have raiding parties that were cutting people's heads off and making trophies out of them. They were exterminating, non-members of their tribe. And I've already talked about at Lovelock Cave how once they captured these red-haired men, they would cut their fingers and ears and penis off. And it was pretty vicious. And I've talked also about the Tyrannina, how they got ran out and they interbred. And their symbols and some artifacts are scattered, but and so are some of these mummies. But like I said, as soon as anything that's out of the official politically correct story, gets confiscated, hidden, destroyed, and anybody questioning this, is a Nazi racist. Well, I'm just about sick of it. And, if you're all concerned about the Nazis, you need to look into the 1933 Transfer Agreement, the 1918 Balfour Declaration, Theodore Herzl's book, The Jewish State, the Federal Reserve System, and Hitler's submarine ride to Argentina after the war. And you'll find that, even that whole thing has a lot of questions that need to be answered, as well as Operation Paperclip and the Catholic Church's involvement. So I'm just pointing this out. I think it's very interesting because they do admit that this is red hair from a Caucasian, but because it can't be like put into some kind of a settlement, they don't really care that they admit that. Whereas when you find some group of burial or some kind of traumatic situation, oh no, we can't have any Caucasian mummies in America before 1492. Well, what a bunch of baloney. And this is just another piece of the evidence for this massive cover-up. And I still think there's a higher plan to it other than just the victim status benefits. I think there's got to be something major, as to why this has to be covered up. And it's all about controlling history and claiming rights. And I think it's part of a larger plan overall for a future world government and who is going to run it. So this all connects. That's it. Thank you.